Eagles Radio on a Tuesday night. Paul Bonza and special guest host Jimmy Toumpas with you. All thanks to Incredible Smiles. Missing teeth or dentures? See Incredible Smiles today. Now, thanks to BCE and CJ Electrical. They are proud partners of the Woodville West Torrens Footy Club. We have a huge guest in the studio.
Massive.
He's got his own chair. He's sitting here. Kym Dillon, welcome to Eagles Radio.
Thanks very much for having me, Bonds, and the Toomp. I'm humbled to be in your presence.
It's good. All right, let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to your early days where you started playing your junior footy, where did it all start for you?
Well, I was a mad West Torrens supporter growing up. I grew up in Greenacres, so I played for Greenacres initially, and we started in the under-7s, I think. Then I went to the under-9s, under-11s, etc. Then it was the days where we had zones. And I wanted to play for Torrens because we'd play in the juniors and the under-7s, under-9s, and I'd go with my brother, sister, mum and dad. We'd go to Thebby every week to watch them play or wherever they were playing. But because of the zones, I was always going to be at North Adelaide. And I tried to live with my grandparents to try and get around the rule. As a 12, 13-year-old, they lived at James Street, Theberton. And I lasted about a week there because they were a little bit strict. But that's where it all started. And, it was great. I loved footy like we all did.
Talk to us. You mentioned North Adelaide. You started at North. Talk to us about those days and then how you actually ended up at the Eagles.
Well, I got sacked. That's how I ended up at the Eagles. North Adelaide was good. Well, we played juniors, so we played in the under-17s, the under-19s. I think in my first year in the under-19s, I got put up to the reserves for a few games. So that's the first exposure to playing against men. And it was very different competition back then, Toomp, because the reserves was a really, I say this politely, if you know Bonds, you can back me up. It was a very high standard, and there weren't the younger players that are in the competition now. There's some really hard seasoned footballers that would go up and back from the seniors and down. So I debuted against South Adelaide. It was back in 78, towards the end of the season. I stood a man called Ron Haitley, who had just got best on ground for South Australia against WA, which is quite ironic, given we just beat them. And because I used to do athletics, so aerobically I was pretty good. And Barry Robram was our coach, and he said, everywhere he goes, you go with him. And I did that to the nth degree. At quarter time, I went over to their huddle. You know what it's like, Jimmy? You're just so pumped in your first game, and it's a dream come true. And, so I got a few kicks that day and got reported in my second game. And then went back to the reserves. There were 2 games left in that season, went back to the reserves, and then 79, we had a pretty good year under Barry Robran again. We missed the finals just by a percentage. And then Mick Noonan came along in 81, I think, and sacked me.
Brilliant. And you did mention the standard of the reserves comp was quite good at that point in time.
Yeah.
Is that you trying to justify your reserves McGarry medal and how good you were at that point? Or?
Well, I think we're giving Bruce Linda one as well. I think you have to be fairly special, Jimmy. You were waiting for that little zinger, weren't you?
Well, I really wanted to get into that.
Bonds would know. I actually don't talk about it very often because it was frustrating. Mind you, I had knee problems and I wasn't fit as I should have been, and I was at Torrens at the time. But I think I only played about 14 games that year. But in the last game that I played, before going back up in the league side, we played North Adelaide. And I kicked 8-3 from centre, and that actually won me the medal.
There you go. Gee whiz. So what are your thoughts and recollections on that McGarry medal, that night in particular?
Oh, look, it was nice to win it, but it was a frustrating year because I think it was my first or second year at Torrens, and I was just when all my knee problems started. So it's really hard going to a new club, and like being drafted and going to Melbourne, you want to impress and show your best. And I couldn't. It was the start of a really frustrating run of injuries. But, obviously I felt comfortable at the lower level in reserves and believed in my ability there. Plus, you can cheat a bit at that grade as well, where you get exposed when you go up the next level.
All right, Mario's texted in saying that, Kym, you might have been poached by the Eagles with a brown paper bag full of hair products. Mario.
Yeah, good on you, Mario. Do you ever sleep, Mario? I had the hair streaked when I was younger, and sometime after. That was my sister did that.
Well, you're going well because you got a lot more than me. Mate, you went to the Eagles and you got the number 17 jumper, the Lindsay Head jumper.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's happy about that.
Did you ask for that, or were you just given that number? Or
the first year I was there, Bonds, and you were there as a trainer. And just so you know, Tom, Bonds used to do a little bit of side hustling. He was a DJ.
Still doing a bit.
And he was DJ at my engagement party and my wedding.
Gee whiz.
Yeah, so
when
I went there, I had number 21 to start with in the first year. And then the next year, number 17 became free. Mark Hewitt was wearing it, and he went to Glenelg. Shame. So, yeah, I grew up idolising Lindsay Head when I was a little kid. My mum knitted a West Orange jumper, and Dad drew the eagle, and Mum cut it out, the yellow felt, and used to run around everywhere with that. So, I asked if I could have 17.
Now, you just quickly, you just said that you're not sure Lindsay was happy with that. Surely he didn't care, did he, or did he?
Did you know him?
No, I never met Lindsay.
No, in fairness to Lindsay, and he was such a superstar, and he was a 3-time McGarry medalist. That happened in my, when I was a little kid. The West Orange Football Club were going to put the jumper away forever. No one was to wear 17 again. So I think he was disappointed. I don't know the dynamics of how that changed, but I think he was disappointed that the number wasn't put away forever. But there was a gentleman they recruited, I believe, I wasn't at the club at the time, a big ruckman from someone that couldn't make it in the VFL, Barry McKenzie, I think his name was. He wore it initially, then Mark Hewitt wore it, so I didn't think it was a big deal. But Lindsay would often remind me prior to a game, don't forget whose number you're wearing.
I love that. And you're touching on a couple of players now, and I love this question because I really appreciate the sample history. I'd love to know some of the best players you played with and against as well.
Best player I ever saw, Tump, was Barry Robran, and I got to play a couple of games with him when he came back from his horrific knee injury, and he wasn't at his best then. I was fortunate enough to play against the late and great Russell Ebert. Guys at Torrens that were wonderful players were Lee Robson in my era, Ian Hanna, Bruce Lindsay. And Bruce was a wonderful player, went on to play state football and be an inaugural Crow. But you would know, Bonds, he was never the player he was prior to his knee reconstruction. He was just a superstar as a kid. So those were the players. And Peter Johnson, we had a lot of players that came. We recruited from Victoria as well. I think the reason we didn't have success was we just didn't have a lot of depth. And the club was always struggling financially nearly every year. You'd have a contract and then there'd be a meeting. Oh, you're only going to get 60% of your pay this year or something like that. But there are a lot of good players around. I remember in 85 when we really started getting pillaged as a state. After 85, like I was playing in Stephen Kernahan, Tony McGuinness, they were all recruited, Mark Nayley. There were so many good players in South Australia at the time.
Yeah, that's right. And you touched on the money, and I know it's quite topical at the moment, particularly in Sample. What was the money pay or the situation regarding salary for Sample players back then?
Well, I had the gift of the gab. I had one good year at Torrens. I managed to negotiate a reasonable deal. So I think back in the day, I hope I'm right here, I think they paid my rent for a while. That was part of my deal. And I think I was on $800 a game, which was good money.
Bloody oath it is.
Back then. But that was per game.
I might chat to Pally about getting my rent paid or mortgage paid.
800 or 4, I don't know. I lose track of it. It sounds a lot of money now, but it was good. It was good money at the time.
Just every now and again, Kim, you mention a certain memory that you have about playing with the Eagles, and I might just have a little snapshot of it here.
Siren must go any minute. We've played 29 and a half minutes. This could win it for Torrens. It's home! And the picture tells us all. The ropes almost come off the ground.
Didn't even mention my name.
I know, it's a bit disappointing, but that was you kicking a check side goal at Thebby. Tell us about that.
Well, I can guarantee you there was not even daylight between the sticks. That's a fact. I was on the fence at the northern end, left forward pocket. The late and great David Hooks was up in the cricket club rooms at the time, which used to be in the right forward pocket at that end. And, that's as time goes past, people always say it was the goal after the siren. There was actually, I think, 9 seconds remaining. We were 5 points down. And they're great memories. I think every kid dreams of kicking the winning goal. And I believe in the footy gods. And I was on my last legs then, even though I was only 25. I knew there wasn't much left in the tank. And the footy gods looked after me. And it was a bloody good night at the club that night. I tell you, Bonds, it was a ripper. And the thing is, though, that put us to third place on the ladder, one game clear in third place. at round 12 in the season, and we finished 9th again.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I had 5 years at Torrens, I think it was, and I think it was 5 seasons, and we finished 9th every year.
Thanks to Anthony for flicking that
Does it?
audio through to me, and he might have just texted in to ask you about that certain goal.
Oh, right. Well, thank you for that. Oh, yeah, there it is. Here we go. I can read it. I feel like I'm doing our normal show. One of my all-time favourite football moments, Kym Dillon kicking a match-winning check-side goal against Glenelg at Thebarton Oval in 1985, I think. Ben from Lower Mitcham. It was a bloody ripper. And you talk about Headsy, you talk about Lindsay Head. He came up to me and I thought the great man's just going to wrap his arms around me. And he walked up and he said, I knew you'd kick that. And I thought, oh, what? Because I'm skilled, I'm gifted, I showed composure. He just said, because you're wearing my number.
Took the credit.
That was it.
From one high to a bit of a low here, Kimbo, I mean, you obviously did your ACL. What are your recollections of that, and how difficult was that to go through?
My knee injuries actually weren't ACL. A lot of people thought that was the case, Tump. I had my cartilages removed at a young age, which they used to do a lot in those days, and it became bone on bone very quickly. And the worst thing, I was getting fractures in my base of my femur and the top of my tibia. So basically, like you can see, you put your knuckles together like that. You know how it works.
Yep.
And because I used to do athletics as well and do a lot of running, it just got worse and worse. Then there was a thing called, I think it was chondromalacia or something like that, which is inflammation of the kneecap. So you're constantly getting bone chips and they get behind your kneecap and then it just rubs like that. It gets inflamed, it gets pitted. Then you have to go in and get your kneecap shaved all the time. And it's like one of the surgeons said, we just can't keep going in and shaving it every 6 weeks because your knee gets it'll be like a cockle shell, gets too thin. So that was a process basically that started when I arrived at Torrens.
And then how did you go, I guess, getting through that from a playing perspective?
It was frustrating because you were never really at your best or fit enough. Like 83 was a great year. I was really fit. Daryl Schimmelbusch had come to the club and he really believed in me. And it's amazing. Confidence is a huge thing in footy. We all know that. You can just see someone blossom, and we see it like Matt Kennedy that's been around for a while now at Carlton. And, you know, when you believe in yourself, you have a totally different attitude. You know, you could be running to a ball in the front of a massive crowd on the wing. When you're a young fella, you think, don't stuff this up. You know, when you've got a few games under your belt, you're running, you're thinking, what am I going to do with it next? So it changes the mindset. So it was a frustrating period, and, it's just the way it was, you know. A lot of players get injuries, and it happened.
Kimbo, stay with us. We're going to take a break and we're going to talk a little bit about your media career, but maybe part of the operation with your knee as well. And because that was at the time, it was world first.
I'm looking
surgery.
at you and I'm feeling Ray Martin. At the moment.
Kimbo's here, all thanks to BCE and CJ Electrical for all your electrical needs. Great supporters of the Woodville West Torrens Footy Club, and of course for incredible smiles. Get a more permanent fix for missing teeth and dentures. Check incrediblesmiles.com.au. Back after the break with more from Kym Dillon. This is Eagles Radio.